Hi, I'm Lisa,
And I'm Johnny.
and we're going to talk about horror movies because this is Gutted, and that's what we do. And this episode, we're actually going to be talking about The Witch. But before we get into that, kind of wanted to address some things from last episode that we didn't really get to talk about. And this is a new format for us. This is mostly like for podcast. And so if you're listening to this, just know that there's sometimes that Johnny and I are going to make some visual references, maybe with our hands or like a facial expression that one of us is making. It's because we have a video side to it all. So if you want to, re-listen to an episode, but like watch it instead, then you can find us on YouTube. And then those of you guys who are watching, you don't have to just come to YouTube to watch it. You can also check us out on Anchor, Spotify. There's a couple other platforms out there for you as well. So, yeah, welcome to the show.
Welcome, yes.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about The Witch.
The Witch. So much that this movie, I don't know, just sort of really frightened me, so much in it. But I'm actually surprised that it was released in 2015 and how fast, I mean, I don't know, I feel like time has just sped forward. Like, I can't believe that was almost 4 years ago now, almost, right?
Yeah. It feels like a really new film, and it's kind of the newest one that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, I would say so. So far in all of our, I think, episodes
of all
so
the
far,
films,
including the way we used to do the show too. Yeah, this is the most recent one.
Real quick, favorite thing about this movie, why it makes such a good pick for an episode.
I think it's because it's different. I mean, it's an A24 product, and it's no surprise that it is because A24 puts out some quality stuff, in my opinion.
What have they put out before?
They most recently, Ari Aster, the most recent filmmaker, put out some movies, Hereditary and Midsommar, who I won't get too much into it, but I've seen both of those movies. Most recently, Midsommar just came out this past weekend, the time we recorded this, and just blown away. I think I would hesitate to call him the king of horror at this time.
Wow.
But it's really done in the style that reminds me of this movie too, and the A24 movies, where they have this indie feel, but they're very raw. They're not jump scare kind of movies. They get under your skin. The frightfulness of most of these movies is sometimes the imagery, but also just the sheer acting abilities of everyone involved. So whatever they're doing out at A24, the entertainment company, putting out these movies, getting these directors out there, this new talent, kudos to them for like the past, I don't know, I want to say I've heard about them, and when I first heard about them was when The Witch came out, but they've done some quality work, and not just horror, but more specifically, they're putting out some really good stuff. So I was, I was happy to see this movie and to see that it's from there, because I'm going to watch every other thing probably from A24 as well.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I saw A24. I had briefly, like, vaguely familiar, but I had no idea that they were connected to all these other films. And like you mentioned a couple of things about this movie, the fact that they don't use a lot of jump scares, and so with The Witch, it's really difficult to know where to start in terms of like appreciation. Like, where do I begin? Do I talk about the historical? Do I talk about the dedication from the actors? Do I talk about the dedication from the director? The mood? Where?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. But you mentioned it. It was, they didn't rely on jump scares, and I think that was a testament to the storytelling ability from the director in choosing those moments, because they only had one location, really, mostly.
Yeah, it takes place mostly in one location, and I believe it was actually shot in Canada.
Really?
Yeah, even though it's supposed to be the New England area in like, the 19th century, or even, 17th. 17th century, the time of the Puritans, what we think of as sort of the Pilgrim kind of look, that era where everyone has this old English way of talking. And you mentioned the historical component of this movie. It's amazing how genuine and true it is to that time period. And we know this because the movie was actually based off of real writings and accounts and stories of people actually, this hysteria of witches, and actually their accounts and what their views and beliefs were of what witches are, and taking that and bringing it to life in this movie. So we know there's some historical fact to this as well, which kind of makes it even more frightening to me that people actually had this vision of what witches are and what their fears were at the time.
Yeah, and so to preface this, in case that you've only heard about the film but you don't know much about it, so the film is set in the 1600s, and it's surrounding one family, and they get kicked out over some dispute we don't even know anything about, and it's kind of like a big fuck you moment from the dad. Like, he's sitting there and he's just having this mini squabble, and it's just like, hey, you did a thing, you should be sorry for it, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna. Like, oh, if you don't like our rules, then you can just leave then. And he's like, fine, I will. And he does it, and his family's sitting right there, and he doesn't consult them. He doesn't even acknowledge their opinion because, he's the head of the household.
Right.
So they get kicked out. They have to go find a new place to be, and they end up in the middle of the woods, and they create their farm and, their living environment, and then just weird shit starts to happen. And it's all based on what's happening in that time. What are the things that they're afraid of in the forest, things that they have to live with, and just the overall culture. And so that's kind of where we're at in this film. And so to get historical with it, this film was 4 years in the making, more than 4 years in the making, because they did so much research, so much research. And I watched it behind the scenes with the director, and the director wanted to transform, or rather transport, the audience into that era. Because in this day and age, in the modern day and age, somebody says witch, and, ooh, it's just Halloween, gags and, some stickers.
Maybe
and,
Bewitched from the 50s I might think of occasionally, but not the vision of what.
Not what this is all like. You think of all of the iconic imagery of the old lady with the mole on her nose or whatever. And it's just so gimmicky and silly. And it's like, how in the world are you going to be afraid of a little old lady? Well, this film will show you how. And that's what's the director's goal, was to take their fear, what they felt in that era, in that day and age, and to bring it to the 21st century table and put you there so that you felt the same level of terror that they did. And I think it was just so successful.
Exactly.
So successful in doing that.
I think it was perfect. And gosh, for this to be his directorial debut, what a hell of a movie to come up with, And I believe he grew up in that area too. So I think he was just wanting to make a movie like this. Robert Eggers, right, is his name. I'm really hoping he does something soon again. I don't know if there's anything announced recently, but gosh, that was really amazing to see. And also, by the way, I got to ask you, did you watch this movie with subtitles at all?
Oh, yeah. So the first time when I got the film, yes, I totally put on the subtitles.
And to give some, context to this, I actually normally watch movies with subtitles anyways. I like to retain all the information and see characters' names, how they're spelled. And I'll be honest, sometimes I'll hear a character mutter something in a movie. I'm like, what the hell did they just say? And a subtitle helps. So, of course, I can't do that in the theaters, but that's why I especially like doing when the movie comes out, putting on the subtitles right away. And I actually caught up on a lot more a lot of the emotions and the things that the characters were saying made a little bit more sense to me on the second watch through when I actually saw it at home with the subtitles. This old English way of speaking, gosh, we were talking about how much they did research on this movie and how much they delved into keeping this true to that era. They went as far as to even have the characters speak in this old English style.
Yeah, the Essex dialect.
Essex dialect, right. Yeah, and it just blew me away. And I'll be honest, in the theaters, like, what did that mean, what they just said? I'm not sure. But
the second time I watched it, I did it without the subtitles because I wanted to experience it how people were experiencing it in the theater. And surprisingly, I didn't feel as lost as I thought I was going to feel, probably because I watched it the first time. But it just makes me think of, like, it's almost for the actors to take this on, must have felt very theater for them.
Yeah, true, right? Because you got the Shakespearean kind of style.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Shakespearean. But the sheer level of dedication to it, though, the commitment to it, and especially at the different age ranges, too. Like, the kids took it on and just smashed it.
Yeah, and that just pays testament, I think, to the director, too. But full credit to the cast as well for acting this out. But, he was probably there making sure that they were on top of how they should be acting with this, And then the kid, I got to mention this scene, though, where we've talked about this before, but there's occasionally we'll start to talk about some spoilers. So spoiler alert. But when the kid comes back from being lost for a while, anytime I see actors or actresses doing some sort of like they're possessed kind of thing, I think that takes a lot of energy out of you for one, but also really you have to really dedicate yourself to the role, because if any moment you do something that's a little phony, it'll be noticeable. And this kid in this movie was spot on with like being possessed and saying these weird, odd things. Like great acting on that.
Yeah, and I actually just read an article about it. So that scene. So to set up what the scene is, Caleb is the son, and he went out with his sister earlier to go check traps and go hunting to try to provide for the family. Because oddly, what's happening on this property is that they can't grow crops. There's like no game anywhere for them to hunt. They're essentially starving.
Yeah.
This whole place just feels cursed to them. So the son wants to help out. So he goes out trying to be, the man of the family, or try to be a supporter, which is adorable, by the way, because that gun he carries is
like
massive.
A musket of some sort, right?
Yeah, massive. It's like twice his size, and he's just muscling it through the woods. At some point, him and his sister get separated. He stumbles across the witch's house, which that whole encounter
that is insane.
Was a moment.
Yeah.
And so we got to definitely come back to that.
Yes, we do.
But so he gets separated, he finds the witch's house. Some kind of encounter occurs. He's missing. Everybody's panicked. The sister makes it back to the house alone. And then eventually they find him because he's stumbling back onto the property, and he's like naked. He's shivering. He's like in a feverish state. And so he's almost somewhat comatose when he goes to lay down, and they're trying to tend to him. So there's this moment that happens, and Caleb is laying there and he hasn't moved. He hasn't done anything. And then all of a sudden, boom, he just wakes up and he's just saying something. He's like rattling off this like prayer or something.
Yeah, some sort of spell or something.
And it's almost orgasmic that he's like in this sense of rapture and joy.
That's true. Yeah.
And then he dies.
Yeah.
He just lays back down and he takes his last breath, and that's it. And so this scene was very, very powerful. And the article that I read was surrounding this scene because this was a pivotal point in the film where the whole story just shifted into this, bewitching. Yes, there's a witch. Now we're taking on something deeper, bigger, more frightening. And to set it up, it was the longest one to film, I think. The longest scene. It was that scene alone was 11 pages long.
Oh, wow.
11 pages. That's intense.
Considering what it's like, I guess that doesn't come as a surprise because it's so intense.
And the director said that they had to do Caleb, the actor, his take, they had to do it all in one take. Try to do it in one take.
Wow.
Without too much breaking so that he could just perform. And you had all these characters that were at different senses or heights of panic and fright, and they were all doing something different, right? You had the twins were being weird. You had Thomason was in her own world, freaked out, and then you had the parents, sort of freaked out at each other. There's a lot of dynamic going on in this, a lot of bouncing around. And so for this actor, gosh, he couldn't have been older than like 12?
Yeah, somewhere in that age range, 10 to 13 maybe, somewhere around there, yeah.
And he just nails it. He just captures this rapture, this joy, and these convulsions, these like physical acting too. And he just dials it all into this moment, and it works. It's just perfect. But he worked, according to the director, he worked a lot with the two actors that played his parents, helped coach him through that. And the whole mood behind his speech or that prayer, it was supposed to be this sort of orgasmic rapture, like level of excitement and joy. And to get him to understand that, obviously at his age, they couldn't explain that because he wasn't going to understand.
That's a challenge.
So they actually used soccer references because that was like his sport that he was.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
so
he was into
the joy
or
you
something.
experience when a goal is scored. Or
Yeah,
something.
it's like
Wow,
you're gonna use that as your
method.
inspiration. Yeah, it's like
Wow.
because honestly, how would you come around to explaining that to a kid, how to tackle that.
Kind of reminds me, veering a little off topic, but it reminds me of The Shining with Danny. I've heard some stories about how they explained to him, like, you know, trying to get him off of, like, you're not really in a scary movie. Like, you know, they try to put him in these scenarios for his acting mindset to act out for the screen. So it's really interesting to hear these little anecdotes about how directors approach children for these types of intense stories, and how they, you know, the little type, you know, ideas they give them to help them with their performance.
Yeah, that's some serious skill sets.
Yeah,
for a director.
Yeah, so this, and then there's other little subtle things too that this is one of the things I like to do. When I see a movie and I really like it, I also like to go on the internet and kind of see like what people's takes are. Not just, you know, articles are interesting. You know, a movie comes out for a week and it's always neat to see like some entertainment source talk about the movie and do a little bit of a deep dive. But I always love jumping into like online forums, especially Reddit, and it's really interesting to see people's different takes. But with that though, was surprised to find out, I didn't catch it the first time, but how subtle it is, but probably is in fact true, how the witches, what they're doing in their ceremony, in terms of like, there's a scene where the witch appears to take flight, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
What kicks off this whole thing when they go out to the woods too is the infant gets taken, right? So, oh gosh, and you only assume, okay, the infant's gone right before the eyes of Thomasin.
Oh yeah,
of course she's gonna get the blame.
Yeah,
yeah, she's playing with the baby, the infant of the family, out in the woods, and you know, the baby just gets taken before her very eyes. But
she didn't see who took him.
Yeah,
right?
So it's a really interesting sequence. You got to watch it if it doesn't really make sense as I'm explaining it. But the whole idea that, and I guess this is something in witch lore, but they use some sort of concoction to fly, and that entails the fat of someone young or pure.
Really?
So when you see these scenes where, okay, well, you put two and two together, the baby was taken, and then you see the witch with the baby, and they don't see it all, but then she seemingly seems to take flight.
Oh man!
So that, you know, not too spoilerish, but it still kind of delves into, okay, that's maybe perhaps what they were going for there.
And the suggestion of what happens to that baby is intense.
It is, without even seeing it too. You know, like
nothing really happens.
Yeah.
It's the aftermath.
It's the aftermath
of what you can assume is the aftermath.
And that to me again is so horrifying. The implication or the of
they didn't have to show you.
They don't have to show it. You know, it doesn't have to be this gory, terrible scene.
They just plant that seed, and that's all it is.
And
that's
it
all
makes you
is.
shiver inside. Like my bones were shaking when I was like shivering. Like, oh, that was a terrible idea to think of.
And it really was one of the best ways to bring the idea of what a witch was in those days in their minds to us.
Right.
And create that fear. Because how could a little old lady be scary? Well, watch The Witch and you'll find out, because that's what they did. They created this soulless, monstrous creature type being that isn't even human, because they show elements of, you know, especially when Caleb stumbles across the witch's house, you know, she lures him in. She grabs him, and then like her hand is turned into this claw. It's definitely not
off
human.
Screen, like you just see the hand, like
yeah, and it's just completely something otherworldly, very paranormal in sense. And so, you know, we get the feel of monster, paranormal, creature, mythical, something that's beyond our understanding, just terrorizing this poor family who had no idea that they stumbled onto witch territory whatsoever. But I mean, getting a little bit further into this, there's so many subtle things like you were mentioning. So first of all, I didn't put it together until after I watched it the second time, but there is a reason why we're seeing this conflict, like in Caleb, in the very beginning. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand it at first. I'm like, why are we have to see him struggling with looking at his sister funny?
Right.
You know, and you see it because he's about to come into maturity, and she's already hit maturity, and there's like no other people anywhere. And so this is his only exposure, but he's obviously visibly struggling with it.
Yeah.
And it's because it's a sin that he's struggling with that's part of everybody in the family is dealing with some kind of sin, like pride.
Yeah.
The dad is dealing
The
with
pride
pride.
is the big one with the dad for sure. Yeah.
Yep. And then Caleb, lust. And they all have something that they're really, really battling. And then Black Phillip
Black Phillip. Yeah.
is hanging out in the background. And is he the seed?
Right.
Is he encouraging this? Is he part of it, or is he there because he felt that it was already there?
Right. And it kind of, I think that sort of touches, at least my belief is, it touches into the weakness of the family. And that's why, there's always this thing within the paranormal world, like the more people are weak and down. And I've mentioned this, I think, when we went a deep dive into The Exorcist, like when people are down, that's when evil or what we believe to be bad energy enters people's lives and really puts them down even further, and I think that's maybe perhaps what the Black Phillip character was sensing from this family and took full advantage of that.
Yeah, because I mean, how did they even, it's not like he came with them from the village. They
Right.
had to have found him out in the woods and it's like, hey, look, a goat. We're going to keep him. And the funny thing is like for a Puritan family who has such strong religious ties to just about everything they do in their
Right.
in their life,
Their whole lives, yeah.
why did they not question their twins saying that they were talking to one of the goats?
Right. That was a little like, and it probably because they're the youngest of the bunch, but even then it's like, come on, you can't take that stuff,
Lightly.
Yeah. It's those kids were being, I think, played from the start in terms of, because there was a subtlety of them singing this song, this sort of
Oh,
rhyme
God.
throughout the movie, and the parents shove it, pay no mind to it, but it's really kind of a sort of cryptic foreshadowing to what's to come.
It is, yeah. And as an audience member, the first time I watched it, I thought it was just silly. It's like, oh, they're just kids. They're just like making shit
fun,
up and having
yeah.
fun. They live in the
Some
middle of
weird,
nowhere.
old Puritan or old English
Game or something.
they're
I mean,
playing.
yeah, because you look at pictures of what Halloween used to be back in the
Oh,
day, and you're
gosh.
like, this shit is like just otherworldly. And,
Yeah.
and we would never do anything like that today. So maybe it was like one of those.
Yeah,
right. What's
exactly,
normal
yeah.
then is creepy to us. So whatever. But what got me was that, man, he really was the devil.
Yeah.
He really was.
As you find out later, yeah.
I didn't expect that to happen, and it seems like such an obvious turn in storytelling. But when his voice popped up in the end, I was like, "Oh,
Dang. That part right there
shit!"
gave me chills. I know that sounds a little lame and cliche, but I'm serious. Like you hear you hear, and it's great because the way it's filmed too. I won't go into too much detail, but just how it was filmed. You just see Thomason mostly reacting to talking to essentially the devil, Black Phillip, aka.
Right. Yeah.
And I love the line he says, though. He's asking her all these questions, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it was like some old English thing, like, "Wouldst thou like to live deliciously," or something
Oh
like that.
yeah, what a great line.
Yeah, I heard that. I was like, oh man, that's really bizarre and dark, but also like the way he says it to whoever.
The way he says it wasn't what I was expecting, but at the same time, like it was.
Yeah.
It
Right.
was something that made my skin crawl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they definitely picked the right voice and the right style and the right tone. So speaking to that particular ending, I actually read in a forum somewhere, or it was maybe somebody's blog post, they said that they were debating whether or not the ending of the film was a happy ending for Thomason.
Oh.
Because if you think about it, her whole life up until that point had been not necessarily traumatic, but definitely traumatic by the time we get to the end. But it'd been very restrictive,
Right.
very hard, very difficult. She was always defending herself. And then what was her reality at that age and that era? Oh, you're of age. You need to go start your own family now.
She's
like
trapped in that
14 or 15.
societal system of just like that trap, of,
Yeah.
oh, you got to fit into this mold of this family. And in some ways, in my belief, is that she will have no freedoms, really, essentially. You got to live by that standard. So, yeah, that's an interesting take on it. Like, did she actually, and not to mention, also, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's 6 years after this, the point of this movie came, that the Salem witch trials started to happen. So if you line that up, who's to say she would have maybe gone back to a village and already being exposed to this very odd supernatural occurrences in the forest, she probably very well could have gone down the path of being on that if you align the two things together like that.
Absolutely, because, considering Thomasin, her age, being a woman, she just killed her mom.
Right.
She's the only surviving member of her family.
Yes.
What the hell is she going to say?
What's left? Yeah.
She going to go to a village? Are they going to believe her?
Right. Like, the entire family's wiped out except for her. Like, how?
And she's not educated. She said it at the end. She didn't even know how to write her own name.
Right. Right.
So it's not like that she could come up with something that would have been reasonable to explain away what happened. She instantly would have been in trouble, instantly would have been imprisoned or
her own
killed.
Family didn't even trust her.
Yeah.
They were she always seemed to be the one that had the finger pointed at, So can only imagine if she's outside of her family, what other society would think of her and what they would accuse her of. So
yeah, it was very sad that the only way that she could find freedom was by committing her soul to the devil.
Well, yeah, exactly.
That was awful.
Yeah.
So maybe that's really the takeaway from that was that there was no happy ending for her. This was the closest she could get,
right? Really,
in the time frame.
Well, I'm chuckling because I'm thinking back to what he also asked her. Not only did he ask her if she wants to live deliciously, but he said something about like, would you like something about butter? Like,
I was totally thinking that right now. I'm like, how is that sinful?
And I thought about that. I think maybe back then, like, it was just so good and hard to come by. Like, butter was just amazing. Like in the Bible, they talk about milk and honey. How amazing was that back then to have access to as a rare commodity?
That's how the devil tempts people is with butter.
Butter. I remember, I think I was watching that very clip on YouTube, and the comments sometimes just make me laugh. But someone said like, yo, butter was really hard to come by back then. So it's like, that's why he said that. So I don't know. It just made me chuckle. But
like, can you blame her?
I know, right? Well, I would say all in all, this movie though is a great look into not only historically how well possibly people were at the time based off of all these accounts. I mean, there's some accuracy to a lot of this.
There is. Because he came away, the director did over 4 years of research of diary entries, court documents, anything and everything he could get his hands on that were around either living in this era or thoughts or feelings about witches. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but the set design. They built the set specifically for this film.
Oh, wow.
And the costume designs, they used traditional material as close as they could get to what was actually used. And then they used the same methods to create the clothing as they would have used back in those days. So, I mean, they kept it to the T, everything like constructing the site, down to the clothes, and I mean, everything. And then, with that in mind too, you're thinking with this, you've built a very simple set design. It's not that complex.
Right.
And with that, you're only telling the story in this setting, so you don't have very many options to keep it visually interesting.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's a huge challenge for the crew to create two different tones. The daytime, everything is fine and dandy and perfect-ish, to the nighttime, holy shit, anything could happen. This is very scary. And they did it with light. They did it with lack of light, and firelight, because the dancing created texture on the walls and created a completely different element.
Especially when you're building in the wilderness like that, like you have to really know, okay, where's the sunlight going to be? What time? How's this looking at this time of the day? So imagine all the pre-production to go into that too, to make sure it's the prime location for where they were building the set, but also using all the natural light as possible. Because I believe, it was the director of photography said, we just use as much natural light as possible for this to give it that realistic.
That's no easy feat.
No, I haven't heard too many movies of attempting that. I think the Revenant did maybe for the most part with.
Oh, that would make sense because the director said he called it his Revenant Junior.
Oh, really? Well, that's great.
But more so, not so for the storytelling or Oscar worthiness. Right. It was more of the grueling shoot days and the schedule
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
of all that, because they had to keep it very gloomy looking, and the weather didn't always cooperate.
Oh, gosh.
And then just getting out to some of the locations, bringing all the gear out there. I mean, they were by a marsh. Some of the scenes were in there. And so it was
Can't
like
imagine.
just a real pain in the ass to get out there. And then you're talking about, 4+ years of getting it together and then going out to
And then
film.
going out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, all in all, you should watch it if you haven't. I know we've talked about some spoilers, but honestly, I don't even think they're that big because, I mean, the movie's called The Witch, so, what are you going to expect? But also, it's everything we've described and more. I think you really need to, it's an experience. It's rare that I say movies are an experience, but this one is for sure an experience.
Like, you have to watch it with the lights off and
Yep.
the sound up. Warning, though, the sound is really intense, but
Yeah.
because there's no score.
No.
And so whatever sounds come in that might you might think is a score, they come in to heighten the sense of uncomfortable,
Dread sometimes,
skin crawly kind of
Yeah.
feeling, and it's really loud
So
in
it'll make you
comparison
feel
from the
uncomfortable.
dialogue.
Yeah.
So just be prepared for that stuff. And by the way, we didn't even talk about everything. There's so many things that I think
we could talk
still didn't even
A few hours at least probably about this movie.
probably. I mean,
Yeah.
so there's plenty of stuff left in the film to go watch and check out. Either relive it because you've seen it and now you've heard us talk about it and it's gotten you pumped to go watch it
Yep.
with all this stuff in mind, or you haven't seen it. You've got plenty more surprises in the film that we didn't ruin for you. So you should definitely go watch
it
it
out.
because it's underappreciated, I think. It came out, it made a splash, and then it just kind of fell off.
Yeah.
And nobody's really talking about it that much anymore. So check it out. The Witch came out 2015 or 16?
2015.
2015. All right, so that's pretty much it
Yeah.
for this episode. We do have an email, so if you
Yes.
guys feel like there's something you want to throw at us to have us talk about, dissect, look into, anything like that, shoot us an email. It's guttedreviews@gmail.com, and we might just put it into a future episode.
Check it out. Yeah. So until next time, we'll be back with some more movies for you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for joining us.
Nice.